So hi there and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlie, this is my little workshop, and today I'm going to be installing this GDEmu into this Dreamcast. But it's not as easy as it first sounds. This is actually a VA0 unit from Japan, so out of the box we're not going to be able to install the GDEmu. In layman's terms, VA0 drives run off 5 volts. The GDEmu needs 3.3 volts, so if we put the GDEmu into the Dreamcast, it's going to explode. Okay, so maybe that's a bit dramatic, but it's not going to work, or even if it does work, it's eventually going to fail. So the best thing we can do is there is a mod you can do where you install these 7 little resistor arrays onto the motherboard. But I've been putting this job off because these things are absolutely tiny. They're smaller than a grain of rice, and my soldering skills are pretty novice. But I think it's time we should just crack on, man up, and just actually get this mod fitted. So why don't we head over to the workshop and stick around and see if I can get it all installed and working. So before I do anything, I think I'm just going to check everything works. So let's just pop in a game. So I've got Sonic Adventure here. This is the Japanese version, so that for my Japanese Dreamcast. So let's just power up, see what happens. Okay, so we get into the Dreamcast itself. Yep, so we go into the main menu, but still nothing's loading. Let's go into play. No, we're still not reading any discs. So I think we're just going to take all this apart and we can install the GDEmu, which is an optical drive emulator. Basically, it's a way of playing all your games from an SD card. Just whip out the power supply and the USB lead. So we just need to take out 4 screws to get into the Dreamcast. One of them's hidden behind this, the modem, and by the power of YouTube, we've got inside. So now let's just remove the fan connector. We can disconnect the controller board from the main motherboard. It's a little bit sticky. Oh, there we go. Just want to be gentle, don't want to damage the flex cable. Now we can just take out the controller board. It's just held in with 4 screws. The Dreamcast is pretty easy to get into actually. This is only the second time I've opened the Dreamcast up and the first time I've actually taken it apart completely. But so far all I've needed is just a good old-fashioned Phillips screwdriver, which makes a nice change actually. Anyway, let's just move that out of the way. Now I can remove the Clean Power Pro that I installed last week. Whoa, that's stiff. Hey! Suppose that's good, makes a good connection. Anyway, let's just disconnect the switch and then we can just move that out of the way. Now we can take the switch itself out. Don't know if my screwdriver just isn't very magnetic, but yeah, the tweezers helped. Anyway, we can take the drive out now. Just 3 screws holding this in. Again, just a good old-fashioned Phillips. And then we should just be able to lift the drive out. There we go. Now I'm just going to take out these, I think there's 8 screws. So just whip those out now. Get me tweezers. That one just didn't want to come out. There we go. Now we can just hopefully just whip through the rest. Just keep your tweezers on hand, I think. So it's worth just keeping track of which screws came from where, because some of them are just different lengths. So yeah, I just keep them organized on my mat. Just helps when you put it all back together again. Anyway, now we can lift out the shielding. There we go. Now we can see the main motherboard. Let's just double check. Yep, definitely a VA0. Let's just take out the controller port cover. Now we can remove this connector. and I'm just going to lift out the cooling system. Thermal pads are a little bit sticky actually. Struggling to get this one up. Just give it a little twist. That's released it. If you look here, it looks like actually it wasn't making great contact with the processor. There's sort of some air bubbles there, so I think what we're going to do is actually install some fresh thermal pads. But anyway, let's just keep dismantling for the moment. So we're just going to move the board out of the way. Now we can start to look at the actual job we're going to do. So because this is a VA0 motherboard, we're going to have to replace these 7 resistor arrays. I believe these are 33 ohms, and we're going to replace them with 100 ohm ones. And this will basically bring the voltage down to the 3.3 volts that we need. So I'm just going to apply some heat to one side of the resistor array, and then that should just transfer through and allow us to lift that off. And then what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of fresh solder onto the 4 pads on the right hand side. Hopefully this will help me just pin the resistor array in place. Anyway, let's add a bit of extra fresh flux. Let's pop that down there. Seriously, my hands are shaking like anything. I'm quite nervous about doing this job. This is by far the smallest component I've ever had to solder in. As you know, I'm pretty novice and not a very good novice at that. So to be honest, I am bricking it just a little bit. But gotta learn, we've got to do it someday, haven't we? I've decided I'm going to use a knife soldering iron piece, and then what I'm going to do is sort of drag it across all 4 pins at once. I'd seen a couple of videos where they use a smaller soldering iron and try and solder each one individually, and to be honest, it didn't look like it was going to go very well. So yeah, I decided I'm going to try this method. Just come in with a bit of extra solder. That's gone a bit off kilter, hasn't it? Just add in a bit of extra heat, see if we can move that over. There we go. Hold that in place. Okay, it's looking better. Is it perfect? No. But it looks like it's being held in place pretty well. So let's come in on the other side, add the solder to the other 4 pins. Okay, not too shabby. Let's just give that a clean up. Right, first glance, I can't see any bridged pins, so that's good. We'll go over later and test them all with a multimeter, but I think I'm going to get them all put in place first. Let's just give it a quick poke with my tweezers, just to make sure it feels solid. Seems pretty good to me. Right, so I'm going to move on to the other 6 on the other side. It's pretty much a repetitive process, so I'm going to show them all being done, but I'm just going to speed through it. I'm getting quite a lot of reflection, so I'm just going to turn the lights down on the microscope, see if that helps. Bear with me 1 second. That's better, a lot less reflection. Hopefully you can still see all right. as this is the last one, let's go through it in real time. So we're just going to poke that into place. I feel like my hands are getting a bit steadier now, which is nice. A bit less nerve-wracking. So we're just going to add our solder, and I'm going to drag it over the pins. There we go. Let's just add a little bit of extra solder and just clean up any bridges on there. Looks like it's a little bit bridged. That looks better. Now we can come in and do the other side. Again, I'm just adding a little bit of fresh solder to the tip of my iron each time I do this. Give it a quick clean, and we're done. Is it the tidiest job in the world? Probably not, but am I pretty pleased with that? I am. Never done anything this small before, so yeah, pretty pleased with this. I'm just going to check the resistance on each of these, just to make sure they're coming in at 100 ohms. All good so far. Just going to add a little bit of extra solder on here because it looks a little bit on the light side. Oh, making it worse. There we go. That's better. Let's just clean this one up as well, where I've just tapped it. There we go. And it's also just worth going around and just checking for continuity, because what you don't want is to have continuity between each of these pins. And the reason I know is because I did. So I didn't actually record it, but I did have some bridged pins, and when I tested, it wouldn't boot. So if for whatever reason it doesn't boot up first time, just go around, check the resistance and check the continuity on all of the pins. And hopefully you'll just find that it's as simple as a bridged pin. For me, it was such a small amount of solder, you couldn't even see it under the microscope. But it was the pin on right on the left-hand side, RA513. I just want to give context. This is the size of the resistor, and this is a grain of rice. So you can see why I was bricking it a little bit, wanting to solder these in. Anyway, let's give that a final clean, and then we can start to look to put it all back together again. Oh, first thing we want to do is actually just replace those thermal pads, don't we? So let's just whip those off. I'll use these as a template in a minute, just to make sure we get them to the right size. Here's some I had left over from my GameCube video the other week, where I added a optical drive emulator into my GameCube. Anyway, let's just cut these to size. Just going to use the old ones as a template. I double checked the thickness when I took them off, but you can just buy these as a kit if you want to. Probably makes it a bit more easy, and you know you're going to be using the right size. I think this was 1.5 mil. Anyway, let's just slide those on. Try not to get any air bubbles in. It's like putting on your phone screen protector, you always end up getting an air bubble. But now we're good to start putting it all back together. So let's just slide the motherboard back in. And there we go. Just click it down over the little notches. There we go, that's seated well. Now we can just re-add the fan and the cooling system with the new thermal pads on. There we go. Pretty simple putting it all back together. It's basically doing what you've done already, but in reverse. So we're just going to add in that connector there. I assume this is something to do with the cooling system for the fans. And then we can put the shielding in over the top. Just make sure you don't pinch anything. There we go. Now we can just slot in the controller ports at the front. Let's not forget to do that. They actually sit under the shielding there. There we go. Then we can just whip in the 8 screws that go around the edge. While we've got this open, I think I'm just going to replace the battery for the controller board. So I've bought a new rechargeable battery. Let's just whip off that old solder there. Just suck that up with some solder wick. Cool. And then hopefully we can just pull that out. A little bit sticky. There we go. We've got it. Now we can just slot in the new battery holder. So this just means that the battery is now replaceable. It's still a rechargeable battery though, so we shouldn't need to change any of the other fuses or the resistors. Let's just solder that back in place. But it does mean that the battery is a lot easier just to replace now in the future. There's no more soldering needed. But yeah, you do need to make sure that you stick with the rechargeable battery if you don't replace the fuse or the resistors. Anyway, let's just slot in our new battery and then we can put the controller board in place. There we go. Just the 4 screws, hold that back in. Let's not forget to put in the ribbon cable. So this is the part that's going to replace the drive, and we're going to put the SD card into that. But there is a problem, and that is it won't actually fit onto a VA0 console because the screw holes and there's some little noggins are in the wrong place. So I have 3D printed this bracket, and that will just mean we can put our GDEmu in place because the screw holes are in the right place. But you can sort of see here, the shell that's come with my kit, this is molded onto the plastic, and I didn't really think about that when I bought the kit. So I haven't had an extra piece of shell 3D printed. So what I'm going to do is actually just take a dremel to it and then screw it into those holes. So I'm just going to cut this off. I actually have no idea if this is going to work. So we're going a little bit A-team, aren't we, on this today? Obviously, if you have access to a 3D printer, you could just 3D print the right piece of shell that would fit onto the bracket. But you know what? I think this is actually a bit more fun. Just tidy that up a bit. There we go. Let's see if this fits onto the brackets. Actually, that's not a bad fit at all. So what I'm going to do is just put the 2 screws in here, and then another 2 screws in on this side, and then hopefully we're going to be all gravy. What I'm going to do is just make sure it all lines up. So I've just got it sat there loose in the shell. I'm just going to put the shell down, just to make sure that when I screw it in place, I actually screw it in the right place on the bracket. So that looks good to me. So now I'm just going to take a drill to this, drill a couple of pilot holes. There we go. I'm going to drill through my fingers. Let's just move that out the way. There we go. Let's just do the other side as well. Oh, there was a couple of little screw posts on here, but they got in the way, so I'm just going to trim them off as well. So I guess I just wanted to show this actually because it just shows you don't necessarily have to go and 3D print everything. If you don't mind putting a little bit of time and effort, sometimes these parts can be customized to fit. You know what? I've not seen anyone do a video where they've customized the shell, so something a little bit different for you. Because how many GDEmu videos have you seen already? Probably quite a few. Anyway, let's screw the GDEmu down onto the bracket. Now I'm going to put in the SD card extension cable. So it just slots into the little gap there, and then we hold it in place with 2 screws. So let's pop those in now. There we go. Let's just slot the extender into the SD card slots, and then we can screw the bracket and the shell, sort of the GDEmu drive blanking plate, into place. And you might have realized I've forgotten to add the switch. Let's take it all apart and put the switch in and do it all again. Now we've done that, we can literally just screw the GDEmu down onto the motherboard. Just reusing the drive screws here. There's only 2 screws you can put in, but that seems to be good enough. Let's pop the power supply back in place. Obviously yours might look a bit different if you've got the original power supply, but if you want to see how you can take that in and out, you can just watch my video from the other week. I'll put a link to it down below. Let's just slot the USB socket back in, reconnect the switch. There we go. And we're getting ready to be finished. Let's just do these last couple of connectors. So this is the fan connector. And we can pop the shell back on. It's the moment of truth, because I actually haven't seen if this fits now that we've screwed it all together. Bit snug, but it went on. Let's take a little look. It looks pretty smart, actually. Not bad, considering I just took a Dremel to it. So anyway, let's just grab the SD card. We can pop that in place. So the kit actually came with this SD card, and it's got a few little games on it, so we can test it out. I'm looking forward to being able to put my own library onto here. But for testing, this is going to do. So we got the Dreamcast all back together, so I think it's now time we just switch this bad boy on and see if it actually works. Give it some power, and fantastic, we're getting the Dreamcast logo. That's amazing. Something's loading. I mean, this isn't the normal boot screen, so that's good. And fantastic, we've gone into the GDEmu screen. So let's just take a quick look, make sure a game works. Let's have a little look at Soul Calibur. So I'm really pleased this is working, because I did have to go back in and re-solder some of the resistor arrays. I discovered some of the pins were bridged with micro solder that I couldn't even see under the microscope. Sadly, I didn't capture it on camera, but I just wanted to say that, you know, if something doesn't work first time, don't worry too much. Just go back, check your work, and hopefully you'll find the problem. For me, it was as simple as a few solder pins, bridging. Just go back, check your work, and hopefully it's all going to be good. So fantastic, we've actually got the GDEmu installed, and amazingly, I've surprised myself and it actually works. So it wasn't as hard as I was expecting. So the little resistor arrays are absolutely tiny, but with lots of flux, a little bit of luck, and a little bit of patience, I've managed to get all of these installed and working. So one thing I would say is make sure you test them all with a multimeter. You want to check whether they've got the right resistance going through them. And you also want to just double check that you've not got any bridged pins. So I had been putting this mod off for ages. Like I said, these resistors are absolutely tiny, but hopefully I've given you the confidence to actually go out and give this little mod a go. But anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I've got some more great content coming up. For example, I've got a Frankenstein Game Boy build that I'm going to be doing. I don't want to say much more than that. I don't want to give it away. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you next time. So take care and goodbye. So you have to replace absolutely tiny. And I forgot to plug in my microphone. And from Japan, so it won't actually be able to, I can't even talk. Workshop. Today, I'm going to be installing this